we know that even in today's technology-driven market, in B2B sales, relationships still drive revenue.
Of course.
Okay. And so by codifying what a relationship is and being able to look back over the last year or two and understand how much momentum you need with different stakeholders to achieve a certain outcome, you can start to codify what good looks like.
Today's successful revenue leaders once started their careers just like you and I. They faced the challenges that their careers brought to them, they rose to the occasion, and became the leaders that we admire today. Join me as we explore the skills and stories that make a great leader with a pinch of vulnerability. Hello and welcome to Sales Therapy. I'm your host, Alper Yurder. Grab a chair. This is your exclusive invitation to the therapy room, as leaders are going to be sharing their career-defining moments, their secret tips and tricks in their arsenal towards success. And I promise we'll always end on a positive note. Today in the therapy chair, I have an amazing guest, Guy Rubin, who's somebody that I have been looking forward to having on the show. He's the CEO and founder of Ebsta, a revenue intelligence platform, which is lovingly used by almost 500 paying clients across the globe. In my eyes, Ebsta is one of the UK's top innovations in sales tech, which we'll talk about because, it's a very US-heavy industry sometimes, and standing out and becoming a leader in your industry, I have things to learn as another UK founder. But Guy built his career in sales and revenue and recently been recognized by Pavilion as one of the top CEOs in the world of SaaS. And he's also a Pavilion ambassador. We'll talk about his success, the joy, the pain, and the journey. With that, welcome to Sales Therapy, Guy. How are you feeling today?
Alper, thank you so much for the introduction. Feeling good. It's been a busy week. Lots happening in our world. Just got back from the US and heading back out there on Tuesday. So, keeping busy.
How frequent are these commutes lately?
I'm probably spending almost half my time in the US at the moment. So it's keeping me busy.
Okay, there's the reality for my co-founder, to whom I always say at some point we're going to have to end up in the US, and we'll talk about that. So any good therapy starts with the growing up years and how it shapes your values, the person that you are today, how you act in business as well today. So can you tell us a little bit about your younger years? You are currently in London, if I'm not wrong, but are you from London? Where did you grow up?
I did grow up in London, although I lived in Colorado for a couple of years in my early teenage years. I was never a particular academic. It wasn't school life wasn't really for me. I wanted to get out and earn money.
Was there a particular reason for that?
Just very driven, I suppose. I wanted to change the world, and I suppose I felt that the best way of doing that was to get into the real world as quickly as possible. So,
all right.
My father, though, insisted that if I was going to leave school at 16, I needed to go and get some sort of qualification. So I trained as an accountant until I was into my early 20s, and then I stepped out of that world into software and sales. Mm-hmm. Found a passion for everything that is the profession of sales. Really, I'm a sales geek, it's probably fair to say, and also a massive data geek as well. So that was kind of the two things that drove me into the directions that we went into. And then I was involved in another software business that was selling technology into recruitment companies, and that's where I met my business partner. That we then left that company and set up on our own. Mm-hmm. And Ebsta is now 12 years old. So that's the journey we've been.
12 years old. Yes, we'll talk about all of the journey, but because I'm curious, in the show ask a few things. One is things that I am absolutely curious about, very selfishly myself, because obviously my guests are people that I look up to, I admire from afar, and then I meet them and I'm like, okay, I want to learn this from you. And then there's questions that come from our audience or our users who are in the world of sales, customer success, especially complex sales, and RevOps. So definitely today people are in for a treat. Let's talk about the road to success a little bit. Like obviously achieving it is not easy. People look up to you and they say, okay, wow, this guy, it feels like he's living the life. He's making it in the world, his impact. How did your career journey start and how was it for you?
Well, look, as I say, I was always very passionate about the profession of selling, and I've always had a keen interest in the influence of data. So when in our first business, the world of recruitment was changing, and companies were going from receiving resumes through a fax machine to receiving them via email.
For my audience, you need to describe, Guy, what is a fax machine?
Yeah, well, there we go. So in the early 2000s, people were still submitting their resumes via post
Oh
or
my God.
through a
Okay.
fax machine. So we saw that change, and everyone started the explosion of the job boards and people emailing in their resumes, and suddenly recruitment companies were inundated with far too many resumes they could never manage. And so our original business turned those resumes into online profiles, and then we could keep those profiles up to date in one place, irrelevant of which recruitment companies the candidate
Mm-hmm.
applied to. So I suppose it was a LinkedIn model before LinkedIn existed.
Mm,
Fair to say we never made it as successful as LinkedIn, but it was
mm,
a really interesting business model and took us down a journey of recognizing the impact and the importance of good quality, consistent data in a central customer system,
mm.
in a system of record.
I
Um,
mean, having seen a lot of people in my 15 years of sales career, there are some careers that give you tough love and teach you things in a very tough way. And recruitment is cutthroat, at times really difficult, where you have to be resilient. You deal with people in both sides. Your product is the people. It's such a challenging, complex sales, don't you feel like?
yeah, I think so. And again, I think it's a brutal place to learn your trade. If you can be successful in that space, then I think there's all sorts of other opportunities. But the reality is that the recruitment industry is quite a small industry compared to
Mhm.
the wider sales ecosystem. For us, it was a great place to learn, to have a big impact on. And then we took that learning into the wider sales community when we set up Ebsta.
Mhm.
And that really kind of led us down the path that we're on now with our original product, which was all
Mhm.
around fixing the data for customers in CRM, because you can't be data driven without good quality data.
So you're one of the founders who was fixing his own problem in a way.
Exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
So, recognizing that relying on humans to manually log their activity, create contacts, or keep them
Yeah.
up to date in CRM, especially if those people are salespeople, means that you'll never have consistent data. And so, rather than trying to beat them up and train them on admin tasks, you're much better off putting an engine in place that takes responsibility for all of these admin tasks, and then training your salespeople on objection handling
Yeah.
and qualification methodologies and things that are actually going to make them better at selling rather than just better at admin.
And in all these years of maybe like, let's talk before you started Ebsta and after you started Ebsta, what would you say the highlights and lowlights of both have been so far for you, looking back all those years?
I suppose that the highlights for me are the relationships we built through the journey, right? So
Yeah,
I very much
absolutely.
believe that the people that we go through this journey of life with are your family, and whether you share blood with them or not. It's fascinating to see which people come into your life for a small amount of time
Yeah,
versus those that come in for a much longer period of time, and the opportunity to work with some incredible people and to be surrounded by and learn from some incredible individuals. I've been very blessed to have that in my life, and that's probably my highlights. I think on the lowlights, again, probably losing some of those relationships.
mm,
Sometimes you have to make some really tough decisions about rationalizing the size of the business or moving away from certain relationships over time, and I think that can also be quite a low light. So
mm. Yeah.
very much a relationship individual, and paths continue to cross over our lifetimes. It's fascinating to see who continues to have a positive influence on your life and who just dips in and dips out.
You're obviously a founder for now the better part of your career, as far as I understand. Did you? So then you always knew you wanted to be a founder, right? Like for me, after consulting for 6 years, sales leadership for 8 years, I took a sabbatical and I said I'm never going to be a founder. And then here is life, because things aligned. But my co-founder, for example, he's always been a founder. This is for startup. Which team did you play for? Did you always know you were going to be a founder and that's what you wanted to do?
I think I suppose if I was to give others advice on this, I have quite a
Please.
traditional view on things. I believe that if you're a talented individual, could you go off and set up your own thing in your early 20s? Sure you could, right? But should you? And I think my view on life is that your 20s are your apprenticeship years, and surrounding yourself with people that are more knowledgeable than you, that have more experience, that are able to provide you with that knowledge and experience and expose you to process and consistent ways of doing things, means that if you can have that discipline to keep employed during your 20s, because let's be honest, once you're a founder, you don't go back. It's very difficult to go and work for someone else again.
Let's
right?
talk about that one too. Oh God, that's something I'm going through at the moment. I'm like, will I, if something fails, will I ever go back? Will I ever be able to go back? It's going to be super hard, I think.
It's very difficult to go back. So I think having the discipline to work within someone else's environment for for a decade, get through that in your 20s, in my opinion, gives you the best possible chance of succeeding in your 30s. And bluntly, while those in the 20s won't necessarily want to hear this, it's okay to be broke in your 20s.
Okay.
It's okay, but it's not okay to be broke in your 40s and your 50s. So what you really, where I see people have struggled in the past is when they peak very early, when they're earning really good money in their early 20s, and all of a sudden they build a lifestyle around that level of income and an expectation that that income is just going to linearly increase every year, year on year. And I think when you peak early and then you have a dip, it can really affect your mental health. I think it can really cause you real challenges. And while I think the temptation is to go after the short cash or the quick win, I think having the discipline to focus on your learning in your 20s, they always say you should either be learning or earning. And if you can keep that learning curve as steep as you possibly can at all times through your career, but in particular in your 20s, and prioritize that over earning, then what you're doing is putting down really good solid foundations. So as you progress into your 30s and your 40s, you have that opportunity to actually build on that foundation and build yourself a sustainable income that can grow consistently year on year, rather than kind of jumping at the shiny dollar early doors. So
perfect.
Well, I'm not sure that's how much people will take that advice on. Those are my
you know
views.
what, Guy? I have a tendency to cut people because at some point I think I have developed this ADHD habit now where I'm like, I lose interest and I'm trying to make sure that people say something interesting. In those last 2 minutes, you poured pure gold and such good life advice for people in those ages, and it made me reflect on my life as well. So, for 2 minutes, I was like, okay, this should continue. Preach, Guy. And I love that. I have a question in mind, which is very personal. You're from the UK, I'm from the UK. And we play in a field very US heavy, US dependent, or either the technology comes from there sometimes, or the biggest market is there, et cetera, et cetera. And I discovered that sales tech, the one that we're in is that. But being a UK startup and US market being such a big market, and you now spending a lot of time there, a few questions on that, if you don't mind. What's the biggest challenge of being a UK based? And I know you don't like that word that much because obviously you're a global brand and that's what all we have to be. But at the end of the day, we came out of this country, right? Do you feel like there's a challenge to that, an additional disadvantage to that, or is it an advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I've got so much advice for new founders as they go on that journey. I think, first of all, do the planning. I think, it's probably fair to say I've made every mistake in the book over the years, but I just try and make that mistake only once at a time. So, or only ever make the same mistake once. I think we're all, we're dealt the hand we're dealt. And we are, I'm based in the UK, my team are based in the UK, and we're passionate about a market that is global. So, we have customers all over the world, but I do agree with you, over half of our customers are in North America. So how do we deal with that challenge? And I think inevitably that is an obstacle. As I say, I end up spending a lot of time on a plane, which can be a challenge and doesn't always help with the family situation either.
Depending on which class you fly. I used to have that life as a consultant.
True. Yeah, also true. But, again, every penny I spend comes out of my pocket. So,
there you go.
You're also very conscious of that. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a disadvantage. I think it's just another challenge that we have to address. And so for us, selling into the US in a traditional format is very expensive. Okay. So if you wanted to hire a traditional sales function, first of all, having a lone wolf in the States doesn't really work. And then secondly, just hiring people in the States. My limited experience of hiring salespeople in the US has been that everyone you talk to is an absolute god and a guru. Everyone you speak to is if they were at company X, if they come from company X, they were the reason that company X was successful. And they've got these great narratives and they're very good at articulating how important and powerful they are and how big their black book is and so on. And I think that can also be a trap to fall into. I think if you are going to establish a US office, then you need to bring the UK approach across. You need to bring the ethos of the UK team over there. So you need to go and be seen. You need someone from the UK to lead that charge.
Yeah.
That's something you're going to do. Now, we tried that approach, didn't work for us, and we took a different approach. So the way we've been successful in the US has primarily been through partnerships, having good, strong relationships with partners and incentivizing partners in the correct way. If you are an ancillary feature or product or service over and above what the partner does, you will never get the traction that you need. If you want the partner to take you to market alongside what they do, you need to be an integral part of what the partner is doing. And incentivizing them at the same time makes sense. And if you get it right, you end up with a whole army of advocates in the US market actively promoting who you are and what you do. And we're a software business, and we sell licenses, and we're really good at developing amazing technology that helps sales teams to scale faster. We have a material impact on businesses' ability to grow, but we're not change agents. We're not consultants.
Okay.
But there's a whole army of change agents in the market who are having an amazing impact on their customers and helping them to become a lot more data driven and build sustainable, scalable revenue engines and sales teams. Now, by enabling those consultants, by giving them the tools, the technology, and most importantly, the data points they need to be successful, suddenly we're a key component in their value proposition. And so overnight, we now find ourselves as this small bootstrap business based in London with an army of partners in the US who are taking us into very different markets. We've got people that are taking us into the SMB space we've got a free trial experience for HubSpot customers, people using HubSpot as their CRM. We've got a mid-market play for those using Salesforce. And again, the expert advisors supporting the HubSpot community are different to the ones supporting the mid-market Salesforce customers. And then we have a go-to-market motion for enterprise, where, once again, very different, much more strategic or strategy consultants are out there advising some of the Fortune 500 companies that have led to us becoming part of those relationships. So partnerships is a great way forward into the US market. And depending on what you're doing, if it's a light touch product, then PLG is also something that you can consider, because then it doesn't matter where you are in the world, because the customer runs their own sales process.
Yeah, but it's not a magic wand. We discovered PLG. I mean, again, this whole section where you're talking about US expansion and your experience, it touches home so much for me. Maybe it doesn't resonate with everybody. I just want to clarify a few of the points you mentioned, which are super relevant. You being the product that enables the technology, the software that enables the change agent is so real, because I think it touches on a few things that you mentioned, like the sales gurus, everybody's an expert, everybody's a change agent, etc. As a product, if you're competing in that space, that's not where you have to compete. You have to empower, enable those people to do their jobs better. So they're going to be like, you will have a mutual benefit from this relationship. Was that always very clear for you, what you just explained, that, we have all these partners, all these go-to motion, which is built on these agents who can use Ebsta as an enabler, or did you come to that after some trial and error?
Yes, as I mentioned before, I've made every mistake in the book. So we've tried hiring people in the US. We've done things in lots of different ways. I think the partnership motion took time, a lot more time than we expected. I don't think we saw any material results for 18 months. But now, over the next year, I expect at least 30% of our new business revenue to come through those partnership relationships.
That's amazing. Wonderful. Well done on that, because I relate to that so much, and I'm sure it must have been a painful journey to discover those things, and the days are going and weeks are going, results are not coming. You're doing some mistakes, and I feel like I'm in a bit of a similar journey where we're discovering, what's the best way to sell ourselves. When you say that 30% of revenue comes from that, that's a very nice dream to look up to.
Well, no, I appreciate that. As I say, it's been a long slog, but it's the technology itself is almost a byproduct. It's more the data points and the insights in particular. Mm-hmm. So one of our USPs is really we score engagement. So we try and digest as many data points from the customer as we possibly can. And most companies are using a whole host of technology, but most of these technologies write data points back into CRM. So if you're using Salesforce as your CRM, you might have marketing intent data flowing in there. You may have data points from call recordings technologies. Obviously we're interested in, we connect to your call records, but also your email traffic and your calendar events, not just to people that use Salesforce, but across your entire organization. And we use that traffic to understand who in the business are you actually engaging with, and how much momentum or engagement have you got with each of those stakeholders. And we distill that down to a single data point we call our engagement score. Mm-hmm. And we know that even in today's technology-driven market, in B2B sales, relationships still drive revenue.
Of course.
Okay. And so by codifying what a relationship is and being able to look back over the last year or two and understand how much momentum you need with different stakeholders to achieve a certain outcome, you can start to codify what good looks like. And then once you've got that benchmark, you're then in a place to then to identify risk in the live pipeline by comparing deals that are in flight to deals that have closed won in the past, to know that, look, at this stage, we'd expect to be this multi-threaded or have this much engagement with this persona. And here's the gap. And that's what we need to focus on next, is our best next action.
Love all of that. I mean, Guy, I definitely have to have you back, but I have so many more questions that I'm going to have to move on, because I want to get your insight and perspective on a few things. Maybe let's do a bit of a rapid fire, maybe like under a minute, kind of your first thoughts on things. One thing that I'm very curious about is, in all these years, your discovery of this following question: when is the right time to add a revenue intelligence tool to your tool stack? Revenue intelligence or customer engagement, let's say. When is that right time for any business?
I think it depends on the aspirations of the company. If you're only ever going to be half a dozen people sitting around the same table, maybe you don't need a CRM. I think the answer to the question comes at the same time as the point when you bring a CRM into a business. Mm-hmm. The purpose of a CRM is a lot more than just becoming a central knowledge base or a repository of data, or a list of targets or customers. The purpose of spending money on a centralized system is to help you scale your business. And one of the reasons we've got a free trial for HubSpot customers is because HubSpot CRM tends to be for smaller businesses, but it's quite light touch. And what we effectively complement that with a whole host of intelligence features, whether that's pipeline insights or forecasting or call AI features. We can enhance your experience within HubSpot and make the data clean and deliver you the actionable insights you need to move forward. What's really interesting is actually the larger the business that we engage with, the less change they can digest.
Of course.
So we talked briefly about the relationship intelligence piece of our solution, which is all about understanding what relationships are driving revenue within the business. The full suite that we have is what we call revenue intelligence. Now, when we deal with very large businesses, certainly outside of SaaS in particular, talking to them about revenue intelligence just blows their mind. It's just far too much for them to digest in any one go. And I think in SaaS we beat ourselves up a lot.
Yes.
I think we all use acronyms, by default. We all assume that the latest, greatest thing we were talking about last year is now old hat, and no one needs to talk about that anymore. When you start talking to organizations outside of SaaS, they all look at us with envious eyes. The insights that we have, the data-driven approach that we have. We talk. We've got customers in the oil and gas space or in the infrastructure market, and these businesses are much more traditional. They're still working out of notepads, or at least a lot of the old sales reps are. But they have taken the step. They are in the cloud. They are using Salesforce, and now they make this weird thing called profit, which is alien to us. Right?
I was gonna say, and they have the money.
And they look over at SaaS and they're interested. They want to know now more about what the way that the new worlds operate. And so you start introducing light touch features. If you're selling to bigger businesses, for us, introducing one data point to a global business, Fortune 500 company, if you can introduce one data point around, in our case, around engagement, around which relationships are driving revenue within their business. We're not talking about giving anyone any new buttons to push. We're not talking about training reps on, if you've got 2,500 reps, training you on a new feature or a new button, that's a lot of work, right? But if what we can do is just enhance the experience they've already got.
This is such an amazing topic, and I think the echo chamber of the SaaS world is real. And I'm very curious to hear how you evangelize it with others, and you already started mentioning that. One thing I'm curious though is, how do you target your first industry outside of SaaS to go after? Like you mentioned oil and gas. Why did you choose it deliberately?
Honestly, partner-led is the truth of it.
Okay.
And
wonderful.
Trying to understand the challenges within a particular market. So, for example, in the pharma space, if you're trying to launch a new drug, there is a lot of regulation about what you're allowed to monitor and manage. And in targeting reps on revenue is not necessarily appropriate if you're trying to launch a new drug, because that's not necessarily allowed. However, measuring their relationships they have in the hospitals or the pharmacies or the doctors' or surgeries, all of a sudden, well, that is appropriate, and actually
Indicators.
encouraging the reps to achieve a certain number of relationships or engagement, all of a sudden that's a milestone that can be measured.
Yeah.
So again, have conversation. The more conversations you have, the more visibility you have of what the challenges are the customers are having. So asking the right questions, doing the right discovery, is absolutely key.
But on the flip side, I guess why we are lazy and we go with our SaaS world, especially in the early days of a startup, is it's early adapters, it's easier, less bureaucratic processes, blah blah. Is that true, or is it a myth? What's your experience of trying to tackle other industries?
I think it used to be true.
Mm-hmm.
I think it used to be true. I think the market has changed. I think SaaS businesses are cutting out tech rather than introducing new tech now.
Exactly.
There's a huge consolidation going on. So I think your low-hanging fruit, as in all B2B sales, relationships are driving revenue, and therefore knowing the people you've got a relationship with are the first place to start. So depending on where those relationships sit, will dictate. When we left our recruitment software business, our first customers were recruitment companies.
Yeah.
In our new product. Now it's fair to say that's not necessarily our core focus anymore. But when we started in business, we had to start somewhere. So we used the relationships that we had.
Yeah, you've definitely inspired me to resume some of those conversations that I have put on pause, saying, too old school, too traditional, too complex. Definitely in March, I'm going to make it a priority to make one of them happen. So thank you for that. What do you think about our space? In general, in some ways, allowing understanding the champion, getting revenue insights, etc. Those are maybe a lot of tools have it, but mutual action plans, digital sales rooms, everything about complex sales, multi-threading, etc. What do you think of our space of Flola?
Well, I mean, look, I think sales organization, every organization that has a front office needs to become a lot more data driven in the way that they operate. And so you'll be aware that we recently, this is the third year of our B2B benchmark report. So we literally, I think yesterday it went live, our 2024 B2B benchmark report, where for this year we analysed more opportunities than ever. I think over 4 million opportunities were analysed, representing over $50 billion worth of revenue. And for the very first time, we also analysed over 1 million hours of sales calls as well. And really,
that's fascinating.
It's fascinating. Yeah, the data, the output was incredible. And I think what became apparent is that one of the biggest takeaways is that only 20% of reps last year hit quota. And that's a real challenge because it's just not sustainable. And in fact, it's worse than that. Only 15% of organizations had at least 50% of their reps hitting 80% of quota or more. Wow. So the data is stark, and it's just not sustainable to live in a world where only 1 in 5 reps is hitting quota. So we need to do something about it. And historically, the answer was just throw loads more money at it because money was cheap, and we'll just churn the ones that aren't working and hire a load more, and then they don't work either, and we go again. But that kind of growth at all cost model just doesn't exist anymore. And so we need to get cleverer. We need to do a whole lot more with a whole lot less. And it's very, very achievable, but it can only be achieved by becoming a lot more data driven. Okay. By understanding the DNA of what good looks like, by breaking down what the top performers are doing at every stage of the sales cycle, and understanding what they're doing well enough so that you can then replicate it with the mid performers. Because there's no reason we can't use this data. And what we've seen consistently through working with our partners is within 3 months, we can reduce the delta between the top performers and the average performers by half, or double the number of reps hitting quota in just 3 months. And you can achieve that just by understanding the DNA of what good looks like. And so we try and break it down to the different stages of the sales cycle. So for those of your listeners, and perhaps we can share a link to download the report.
We'll definitely share I will do that. Yeah.
Very good. So in the report, what we tried to do is break down what we're seeing the top performers doing differently to the average performers at every stage of the sales process. So, for example, when we talk about prospecting, we see that the top performers are twice as likely to self-source their own opportunities. They're also much cleaner and clearer about which leads coming in the business are the ones they want to work on. And top performers, for example, at the qualification stage will close offers lost at least 30% of their opportunities. because they are ruthless about only wanting to work through a sales process with someone who's in market and has a budget and knows that they're going to make a decision on a definitive date. So, and I can keep going through the whole sales cycle.
I definitely want to keep going on over it, but yeah, I mean, there's so many areas, and they all coincide with what we're trying to do. Any other must-haves from the report? Any other punchlines that you definitely want to share, because those are fascinating facts?
Look, so many. I think that the point is that delta between the average performers and the top performers 2 years ago was 4x. Last year it was 6x, and as we enter this year, we're sitting at nearly 9x. And we're living in a world now where those top performers can almost hold the business to ransom because they are so valuable and so precious. And actually, as leaders, what we need to do is help the rest of the sales team to level up. And we can do that by a number of simple things. Number one, let's take away any admin burden, because frankly, they're not very good at it anyway. And actually relying on humans to do the admin means that the data we're leaning into to make decisions isn't consistent. Mm-hmm. So we need to put in engines in place to log our activity, create contacts, keep them up to date. But the technology can do a lot more than that now. So for example, I'm a huge advocate of qualification methodologies. Mm-hmm, so whether you want to use something like Spiced from the good guys at Winning by Design and Jacko, or you're a fan of MedPick or Medic or Band, it doesn't matter. But whatever methodology you've chosen to bring into your business, you can sit in a classroom and teach the reps how to actually fill them all in. But if you go back 3 weeks later, and believe me, we've done it, right? Yeah. We've got a widget that sits inside Salesforce, sits inside HubSpot, and you can fill it in. And people love it, they buy it, it's great. But then when you look back 3 months later, no one's bothered using it. And why? Well, because salespeople are really good at building relationships, building business cases, closing business, building trust and so on. But what they're really bad at is the admin. So what we've recently launched, in fact, about 6 months ago now, we launched our Call AI features where the call recording, the Zoom call or the Teams call is automatically being recorded, and the AI is analyzing the transcript and pre-populating the medpic for the rep. And so the manager ends up with a green or red signal as to whether the opportunity has been qualified well enough to lead discovery. And instead of the rep having to do any admin, they're now just getting a flag. And they only have to get a red flag once or twice before they update the way that they do their qualification, because they want to get out of discovery. They want to win. They want that extra flag. So using technology in a way that's going to enable the sales team and actually score every stage of the sales cycle so that we, compared to deals that have closed one in the past or the top performers, means that the sales guys on the ground, they know what good looks like. If they can see in a picture format that, a great one is, we know that, for example, with one particular customer, we did some analysis. Their average number, when they're in an average sales process, they're engaging with 3 stakeholders. However, when they engage with 6 stakeholders in the sales process, they're twice as likely to win. Now, once you show that to the reps on the ground in a picture, suddenly 3 months later, the average number of stakeholders they're involved with is more, 6, right? So they want to win, and you've just got to enable them by showing them that, if there's a particular persona within your organization that you sell to, that when they're involved as your champion, your win rates are much higher. Well, we did that with a particular customer. They knew who that persona was, or we were able to show them that persona, but only 8% of their opportunities had that persona in as the champion. Now, again, by showing that to the reps on the ground, guess what? 3 months later, 23% of the opportunities they were working on had that persona engaged. And so you can enable these people by showing them what good looks like and allowing them to focus on the things that they are experts at, and take away the burden of anything that's admin and admin based. That's not to say we don't need the data. We absolutely do, but the machines are better at logging that stuff than the people are.
Absolutely agreed, and all of the above. One thing before we go, I always like to ask this question to my guests is, revenue is not just about the sales team. There's others involved, like client success is a big part of it. Onboarding is a big part of it. For you, in your experience, how did you improve the sales client success collaboration in your organization? Or if, Ebsta is helping with that a little bit, like how do you approach the complex onboarding? Because the buyer, the user is the person that we need to really, fascinate in the way that we provide the service. Do you have like tips, tricks to make all of that work?
I could wrap it up and make it sound really complicated, but it's really simple. We know that relationships drive revenue, and that revenue is just as important in new business as it is in onboarding or customer success, cross-sell, upsell, and so on. Guess what? The customers you are most likely to retain are the ones you've got the closest relationships with.
Of course.
The customers you're most likely to cross-sell and upsell to are the customers you've got the closest relationships with. And not all relationships are equal, okay? If you're doing your QBRs with the secretary, you're going to get a very different set of results if you do the QBRs with your principals, your customers. So knowing which personas are giving you the right outcomes, and they're not just, went to a customer the other day and they were very proud of the fact they'd introduced QBRs. I said, great, fantastic. And what are the results? Well, they're mixed. I said, okay, well, why is that? Oh, we don't know. It turns out that the ones that are going really well, you've got buy-in from the C-suite. While the ones that aren't going very well, they're cancelling meetings, they're not doing the QBRs, or they're putting a junior resource on it. Well, you're not engaging with the right personas, right? So knowing which personas your team are engaging with, encouraging them and setting up, almost incentivizing that. And again, if you've got an engine that's scoring relationships, that's telling you which personas they're engaging with, and most importantly, putting in gates and triggers so that you get alerts when specific relationship starts to trend down is absolutely key. And that applies in all walks. We did a big piece of work with a huge consulting business, and their average sales cycle can be a year or 18 months long. And they're spending, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on that sales cycle, but they're only winning 30% of their opportunities. And when we went in and did the analysis, we could show them very quickly that, look, the engagement on this opportunity started to trend off 3 months ago, but you didn't know that. So the sales reps coming in telling you how great they're doing, they've got a team of 50 people working on this opportunity, but it turns out the C-suite at the customer stopped engaging 3 months ago. Now, if we'd known that, we could have either done something to course correct and got re-engagement with the right stakeholders, or made the tough decision to close the deal off as lost and move forward. And again, consistently, the top performers know when deals are not progressing at pace, and they do something about it, or they close it off as lost. But once deals start to slip, if you've gone more than 7 days without a next action at least agreed since the last meeting, the chance of that deal slipping is 65%. So keeping pace is absolutely key. And you'll see all of these data points and a whole lot more in the report.
Yeah, I have no words. Loving it. Okay, now, as any good therapist, I'm going to have to cut us on the clock. Just any closing remarks before we say our final words, or any questions I should have asked you that I haven't, Guy?
Well, as well as being the CEO of Ebsta, it's also worth me mentioning I'm also blessed to be the CEO ambassador for the Pavilion community. The Pavilion community is the world's largest community of execs for high growth businesses. I'm particularly interested in the CEO piece of that. So there's a very specific motion for CEOs. And look, for what it's worth, being the CEO can be a lonely place, right? Heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? And I'm certainly not looking for any sympathy. However, having a community of other CEOs around you is always a good thing. And I've got so much value from that community. And I'd encourage anyone who's out there to think about getting involved in that. And if they want to find out more about Pavilion, I don't get paid any more money. I don't get any incentives for others to join or anything like that. But if you want to know more, please reach out to me on LinkedIn about.
Don't worry about that, Guy. I don't even have an ambassador title on my thing, but for the last 2 years, I've been a Pavilion member, and I contemplated for 6 months before paying for the membership. But once I have done it, I've probably referred 5 people who've become members in the past, whatever. It's we'll definitely, Pavilion is a great ally. Yeah, it's a very unique community, and I hope we keep it that way, because let's be honest, there's a lot of toxicity in the sales community as well, and you don't want that. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for joining me, Guy. This is going to be a wrap on this episode of Sales Therapy. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to us on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to having Guy again on the show. I hope you enjoyed it too.
Very good. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.